Finance Committee for Wednesday, February 15th, 2023 to order. Do we have any public comments?
No, sir, we do not.
All right, how about approval of the minutes? Moving to the approval item, starting with the minutes from December 14th.
I'll move to approve the minutes as presented.
Being that Commissioner Watson was not here then, I'll make the second.
Okay.
Any thoughts or discussions? All in favor? One abstention. All right, we'll move into the approval of the minutes of the executive session of December 14th, 2022.
I'll move to approve the minutes of the executive session of December 14th, 2022.
And I will second that one as well. Any discussions or thoughts? All in favor? And one more abstention. All right, moving into approval item 3, Mr. Burrows, Academy Creek Water Pollution Treatment Facility Rehab Project, change order number 3.
Yes, sir. We've winding down the project at Academy Creek. There has been a couple of change orders on this project. Today, the first one was $64,000 and change. And for a summary of a lot of items that went together, some give and takes on that project. The second change order was $427,000, of which $400,000 of that change order was due to additional scope to pave all these surfaces inside the plant. This is change order number 3, which is to pay the contractor for moving a electrical panel from one location to another to ensure that it meets appropriate electrical codes for clearance in front of the panel. So the cost to do that, $7,577. Also associated with this is a time extension of 120 days to complete the remaining punch list items. The updated substantial completion date will be February 28th, so here in a couple of weeks. And there's one more item that must be started up to reach substantial completion, and there's a handful of punch list items mostly associated with electronic issues with the new equipment that have been installed. The request to you today is to approve change order number 3 in the amount of $7,577 and extend the contract time for 120 days for Ruby Collins to complete the project. Final completion will be March 20th to do this.
And just informationally, Commissioner Watson, this was discussed at length at the Facilities Committee at the 1 o'clock meeting. Do we have a motion?
I'll move the Finance Committee recommend the full commission approve change order number 3 for the Academy Creek WPCF rehab project in the amount of $7,577 and approve a time extension of 120 days for Ruby Collins, Inc. to complete the project.
Second.
Any thoughts or discussions?
I do have one question. Any issue with getting equipment for this, or any lag? No.
No,
Okay.
sir, they've just they've had to extend some conduit a little further, move it from one wall to another.
Oh, okay. All right. Great.
Any further questions or discussion? All right, we'll take a vote on it. All in favor? Motion carries 3-0. All right, Mr. Burrows, I believe this next was also you, Pump Station 3102 electrical. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Owens, I'm going backwards here. Ms. Owens, Banking and Merchant and Investment Services Agreement.
No, you missed
Yep,
one.
we skipped
You missed
3102.
one.
Okay, well, I was right the first
You were
time.
right first
You were
time,
right.
sir.
You were going
Never
down.
doubt yourself, sir.
Never
Okay,
doubt.
yeah, exactly. All right, Pump Station 3102 Electrical Service Contract Award. My apologies.
Yes, sir.
Stage fright here.
Yeah, Pump Station 3102 is located at exit 29 adjacent to the Pilot Flying J Travel Center. Currently, that pump station is fed from an electrical service on the Pilot Flying J property. That has failed and is currently on bypass. The request here is to pay Georgia Power to install a new dedicated 3-phase power service feed from the other side of Highway 17 into the station so that we are no longer beholden to Pilot Flying J for the power service. The quote from Georgia Power was $36,496.18. This is much more costly than what these typically are because of the location being across Highway 17 and also because that is extremely wet and they're going to have to bring in matting to actually install the service. So this was discussed at length in the Facilities Committee meeting and will be paid for out of the Systems Pumping and Maintenance operating budget.
I will say that the reason this looked so familiar to me was because we did just
talk about it. So.
in facilities. So I was like, wait, we just talked about that. It was at the 1 o'clock meeting we talked about it. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Burns? There a
That's it
motion
this time.
I'll move the Finance Committee recommend the full commission approve a contract award to Georgia Power Company in the amount of $36,496.18 for the installation of a new electric service to Pump Station 3102.
Second?
Any questions or further discussion?
Just one comment. I understand that Georgia Power has to be paid up front before they begin the work?
That is correct. They request payment up front, and then they'll come in and do the work.
Even no.
One
no
advantage we
trust
have
in
to
us,
that
so-
is,
Yeah,
of course, there's no change orders at the back end because they've already been paid for it up front.
right down to 18 cents.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right,
We have a good relationship with Georgia Power. We work well with the local guys
right.
here.
And this is three-phase power that's coming
three-phase,
in?
480 volt. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any further questions or discussion on? All right, we'll call a vote. All in favor? All right, motion carries 3-0. All right, trying the approval items one more time here. Banking, merchant, and investment services. Ms. Owens. Mr. Owens, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. Let's see, this past fall, the Brunswick-Glynn Joint Water and Sewer Commission issued a request for a proposal for banking, merchant, and investment services. We had several candidates. We made our selection, and at last month's commission meeting, the selection of Synovus was approved for our banking services, merchant services, and investment services. Synovus has actually been providing our investment services for the past 3 years. So the transition or the new services would be banking and merchant, transitioning from Truist to Synovus. At this time, we're simply requesting permission and approval to sign the necessary documents to begin this relationship with Synovus regarding our banking and merchant services and get the ball rolling on our transition. We hope to be receiving the documents, signature cards, etc., tomorrow for the commission meeting. So at this time, the staff recommends that the Finance Committee recommend the chairman, vice chairman, executive director, deputy director, and director of finance be authorized as signatories for banking, merchant, and investment services and execute the necessary documents to begin that relationship with Synovus.
We have to have multiple people because they require 2 signatures on everything. And of course, y'all sign the major contracts, but the day-to-day stuff, y'all don't have to get involved with, but in case there's people out, you still have to be authorized to sign that documentation.
I have a question. When you do electronic things, how is that done on the computer system where 2 people have to approve?
Yes, multiple people are involved. There's approval thresholds that everybody is involved in. So yes, everything has at least 2 approvals. Some of them have more.
So they have to be signed into their account to be able to?
That's correct.
Okay.
And if I may add, there are also phone confirmations that are made with certain transactions, just to confirm those electronic requests as well. So there's an additional layer of security.
Okay, great, thank you.
That's great, and I think it's worth noting that there's a lot of fraud right now with people trying to trick those systems, sending things from fake emails to make it look like you're, Mr. Burris sending something from his personal
Had one
email
yesterday.
address.
We caught it. It didn't
Right,
cause
sure.
any problems, but we had another one yesterday. They were asking for a payment on an invoice of like $28,000.
Yeah, there's a lot of scams. I mean, I know you know this, but going around where somebody will make it look like a home address and they'll send something saying, hey, this is Andrew, I'm out of town, please approve this immediately. And
They seem to ask for a lot of Home Depot gift cards. As I've told everybody, I will never send you to buy a Home Depot gift card. I'll just tell you to buy something at Home Depot.
And I know there's also been some cases where people have, represented that they were from a company and they said, hey, we're just changing our bank here. I'm the CFO, here's the new routing numbers. Please, submit all future payments through.
We have had that happen, and our standard procedure is to pick up the phone and call the company and confirm that that's what they want to do.
Is that all, Mr. Owens?
Yes.
Any further, or any motion on the floor?
I'll move the Finance Committee recommend the full commission approve that the chairman, vice chairman, executive director, deputy director, and director of finance be authorized as signatories for banking, merchant, and investment services, and to execute the necessary documents to establish a Treasury Management Services Master Services Agreement and renew the investment services agreement with Synovus. It's a long motion.
It is a long motion.
Yeah, I second that motion.
Any further discussion or questions? All right, all in favor? Motion carries 3-0. Thank you all. Okay, moving into the discussion portion of our
We got
meeting.
one more approval.
One more.
Oh my goodness, I'm way off track today. All right, my apologies.
We're getting rid of the good stuff here.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, last approval item, surplus equipment inventory. Mr. Burrows.
Yes, sir. So we have several items here for your consideration to approve as surplus. The first handful here that are vehicles have been replaced with newer vehicles in the past couple of years. As you can see, most of them have extremely high mileage on them, and they all have some form of maintenance issues that are continuing to ongo. Front-end issues, transmission issues, engine issues overall. So the ones that start SPMD, WDD, WPD, and WTD are vehicles associated with those. The bottom four items are landscaping equipment that we used to use in-house for doing landscape maintenance in-house. We now use a third party for doing that, outsource that in fiscal year 21. And so we're not using this equipment this time, so we're going to declare it a surplus. The first six items, you will probably not get much value when you put them out on GovDeals for, but the bottom four, some of those we will get some decent return on selling those through the GovDeals website, since we don't have a use for them anymore. The request is to declare all 10 of these items as surplus, and we will dispose of them in the manner most beneficial, which typically involves us putting it on GovDeals out for auction for somebody to purchase the equipment if they so need it.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move that the Finance Committee recommend the full commission approve the above listed items as surplus to be disposed of in a manner most beneficial to the JWSC.
Second.
I have a question. These mileages, are these typical of what we get on vehicles before we use them up?
Yes, sir. Almost every one of it, especially the crew trucks, before we replace them, they're going to have 180, 200,000 miles on them.
That's great.
It's not like your standard personal vehicle where you're going to put 10,000 miles a year on it. You're putting a lot more mileage on it each year than that. Now, we'll say if this gets approved today, there's going to be another list next month for you. We're trying to clean up some of this old stuff, get rid of some of the vehicles that don't really have much use that we've had replaced in the past. I think historically, we've bought new vehicles for consideration of replacement and then kept the old vehicles because people in the water and sewer business tend to be hoarders. And we're trying to clean up some of that stuff that's not useful for us anymore.
And there's no highway miles on these. These are all.
This is all city
All
miles.
stop and go.
Yes, exactly.
And where do we store these items? Do we have a storage area? Where
Currently, there's taking up spaces in the parking lots at the different facilities.
Okay, yeah.
Even more reason to get rid of them because parking is at a premium at all of our facilities.
Okay, so yeah, that's, yeah.
And we're making sure we're updating insurance in real time when we're disposing.
As soon as these come off of our books, as we're no longer going to drive them, we're going to update insurance on it.
So, did we have the motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Second. Is there any other discussions?
Send them
Questions? All right, how about,
Approval?
yeah, approval, yes, sir, with a vote.
We're,
Carries 3-0. Y'all, I'm sorry, this stage fright will get better by next month. All right, now moving into the approval section, or the discussion section of our meeting. Financial statements, month end on January 31st, 2023. Ms. Wilson?
Thank you, gentlemen. Before you are the financial statements as of January the 31st, 2023. First up, we have the balance sheet. Our cash and cash equivalents, $3.3 million. This does include a $2 million ARPA check. We did receive it in January from the county, those funds. We've been looking for that.
is that the second one?
That's the second payment, yes.
Oh, the $4 million? Okay.
Yes. Construction in progress is $31,954,000. That has been decreased due to capitalizing a project. We will mention that more on the project report. Our total assets, $251 million. Unearned revenue is $4 million. The $2 million ARPA checks need to be counted as unearned revenue until the point that we use those funds, and then we'll have to reclassify them.
Still not sure why it's a liability, but I'll give up that argument.
Yes.
Yeah.
Page
Yes,
2.
Exactly.
Page 2, total liabilities, $78,900,000. It is noted that the total assets are 3 times the amount of our total liabilities. That's always a good thing. Any questions on the balance sheet?
Ma'am, please continue.
Page 3. We have our summary revenue. Noted for the revenue is the percentages that we use to calculate the 7 months of the budget. Sewer, 59.53, water, 60.22, debt charges, 58.51, and administrative fees, 58.66. This keeps our revenues more in line with the, is it 4-year historical or 5-year?
4-year, because that's how long we've been on this rate structure.
Yes. Interest income, we are seeing that number slowly start to recover from the mess that was last year. So the operating revenues is currently $965,659 over projected budget. At the bottom of the page, the capital improvement fees, a little over $900,000 as of January the 31st. That is down like $100,000 compared to January 2022.
Well, that's all right. We got a couple of big projects fixing to, that's not linear by any stretch.
Right, yes. So,
Gotta go, well, it should, assuming they pay for their plans are approved, we're just waiting on them to pay the fees.
right. All right, on to page 4. This is our expenses by division. Our operating expenses, including POs, they're over budget at $423,274. Again, they put the POs in. Some of those are blanket POs for the year, chemicals, that type of stuff. So we draw against that blanket as we move forward through the year. And expenses are, portion of the budget is allocated 1/12 each month for those. Capital projects are all front-loaded in July. I don't think we've managed to get through most of our capital purchases.
I think we got 2 left, but most of them have been completed.
Right. Net operating revenue is $542 if you take the operating revenue and the operating expenses. We're at $542 net. I will mention on the interest expense, it is a negative, or we're showing a balance of $189,385. We did make a 6-month payment on that debt service for the 2021 bonds. And I was thinking we did not calculate that, but it was not, we did not have those numbers when the budget was prepared this time last year, and the bonds didn't come through till September, so. Net revenue before capital fees, we're still at a net at $274,000. Any questions on expenses? I have given you a handout. This is an update on the group insurance. The group insurance costs are expensed out in the finance department budget. So to try to minimize the rising cost of medical costs, the commission moved to go from fully funded to self-funded in August of 2020. So we generally do this handout on a quarterly basis, but since we have a new commissioner, we did want to update these numbers and let him be aware. The center of the page there for the comparison, it was a little over 1.8 million the last year that we were fully funded. The first year that is supposed to be 1 month fully funded and 11 months self-funded, that number dropped down to 1.567. And then last year, our total cost at June 30th was $1,473,000.
The one thing is, I want to note here is, I think at one point, we were at 2.3 million, I think we were.
That was what the estimated cost was to redo the fully funded. They were gonna
Right.
jump it up like 20% on us.
And I remember sitting here and asking the finance director, how much did they allow at the time, not this, how much did they allow every year? And he was talking 8 to 10% a year. So if we take that figure and figure out what our insurance costs would be if we hadn't switched over to self-funding, we would probably be approaching $3 million a year. And while we've done this, the employees didn't get any cut in benefits. And because of the, typically what happens is when insurers provide insurance, every year it costs them a little more, so they pass some of that cost along to employees or they reduce the benefits. And we haven't done any of that. We haven't passed any costs along to employees in total time. And fortunately, we have employees that are reasonably healthy, and and we're encouraging people to do screenings and to do things like that to keep themselves healthy. So this is really a significant, reduction in the cost. I mean, if we're at $1.4 million, that's very encouraging. And it's something that we have to do to retain our employees, to give them good insurance. And, and there's no such thing as an ideal plan, but employees do have choices. And the other thing, of course, is that even though some people have deductibles, because of Obamacare, there's many different screenings that could be done that don't count towards the deductible, that you can have done at no cost to you. So there's a lot of benefits here, but I wanted to be sure that we kind of stop a little bit and think about that, because 1.4 million versus probably close to 3 million. And I think we're really doing something very positive here for our employees and for the organization. And I think it's real notable, and it was an excellent decision. I really appreciate what's going on with it, so.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner.
At the end of last year, I will note that our budget was a little over 1.8 million, and our cost was 1.473. Our budget this year is 1.7, and we are closer to that monthly budget. Last month, it was a little over 34. We were under budget by like 34,000. As of January, we were under budget by almost 52,000. So that's as close as that margin has been since we started this.
And these are pretty up to date, because don't we pay weekly still?
Yes, we are invoiced weekly.
Every Friday.
By United Healthcare, and we transfer the funds to them and book a expense to the group insurance.
Right. And the whole process is, United Healthcare prices out all of the bills that come in and does the fair pricing, then passes it along to us, so that we do have them intervening. They're still doing what they were doing. The only thing is, they're not doing it so they can make more profit for themselves. They're doing it so that for the benefit of our organization. So.
And what portion of the difference between our budget and our actual cost will we move into reserves? Are we?
Technically haven't done that last year because we didn't have any remaining funds because of the investment issue. Previous year, we did transfer, I think, $300,000 in there, because it was like we budgeted like 1.85, and it come in at 1.5, so we moved like 300,000 in there. So we got like 900,000 in a reserve. If we went over the budget for that, we could pull money out of that reserve to compensate.
Yeah.
Essentially, we spend the whole budget before we touch that.
Yeah, right.
That's our savings.
And remember, we also have the stopgap insurance.
Yes.
For individuals and for an overall, so that our liability is capped somewhere along the line here, so that we.
75,000 individual.
Did we go from 60 to 75?
I think it's 75 and
75 for individual, and I think the corporate is 2.1, 2.2.
Yeah. So that would be our finite cost that we would never exceed because of that, so.
More questions? All right, on to page 5, which is our supplemental schedule of cash balances. These numbers, the total of these numbers will match back to numbers on the balance sheet. This is kind of more of a detail to those numbers. The first portion is the operating debt service cash accounts. We have our cash and cash equivalents. That 3.32 was what was on the balance sheet. The revenue account is our main depository account. Payments go into this account as we need cash for funding, payroll, disbursements, that type. We do transfers out of that account. And as mentioned earlier, there's one person who will request those funds, somebody else who will authorize those by matching the numbers, somebody else who will initiate, and somebody else who will approve those on bank. So there are several people involved in that step. The general checking account, that is our disbursement. Any checks or EFTs come through that account. Again, we'll just do a transfer out of revenue into that. Payroll account. Again, we get a invoice for payroll through our third party who does our human resources. They tell us how much our payroll is. We'll transfer funds into that account, and it's just a pass through. They'll ACH that out. We keep a very minimal balance in that. I do want to note that the government finance is 0. That was the funds for the VACON trucks. We have received those. That invoice has been paid, so that is now at 0, and we will remove that account from next month's report. Group insurance, we are required to hold a minimum balance of $29,000 in that account. Petty cash, $4,000, that is the cash drawers upfront plus $100 petty cash. Bond sinking fund,
Oh, can I go back?
Go ahead.
When we have petty cash, do we have a larger amount of money available, like if we're going into an emergency mode or
We go
something?
get money at that point, yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
or bonds,
That's one of the things on the checklist.
Okay.
oh yeah, first thing, cash.
Get some more cash. Okay.
Our bond sinking fund, $2 million. We make a monthly transfer into that account based on what our principal and interest payments are going to be for the year. We'll make one principal payment on June 1st. We do 2 interest payments, one in December, one in June. Our elective reserves, the operating reserve, capital R&R, group insurance, these are reserves that the commission has chosen to set up for various purposes. Our operating reserve is set up for 4 months of operating expenses in the occasion, natural disaster or something that happens and everybody's kind of hurting. We'll have some cash reserves. We have our capital reserve. It was originally intended to be used to offset future borrowings, and now we set that aside for some
Expansion.
expansion work. Thank you. R&R replacement, it's a reserve established at the issuance of the 2010 bonds, funded in the amount of $7.4 million, and it's utilized for the completion of infrastructure repairs. We'll commonly refer that to as the R&R reserve. Group insurance, that is the funds that we currently have set aside in the case we need those for the group insurance. At the bottom, we have the bond trustee reserve. That is the construction fund and debt service. We did have a drawdown of the construction funds. We put the request in on January the 31st. We received those funds yesterday, so we've drawn down $1 million of those funds. And again, we've paid out in January $189,000 for debt service for this year. Page 6. We have some legally restricted reserves, our capital improvement, utilized for the complete expansion projects, projects. As we receive water and sewer tap fees, the capital portion goes into this reserve. We have a SPOS account. We only have $282,000. That's from SPOS 5. So this remaining amount has been encumbered. It's for a little bit of engineering left, but mostly it's retainage.
It's engineering on Academy Creek.
Yes. Customer deposit reserve. This is the deposits held that we receive from our customers when they open an account. We are refunding those as the customers meet the criteria. We have just done January's earlier this week. So that is, we set that money aside as needed.
And on these columns where you says truest overnight cash, these are where we're investing the money overnight
That's in money market.
in the money market, yeah, okay.
Yes.
So we're getting interest on that
Yes.
money.
But very little from the money market, right? I mean, what's our money market bringing us?
I'm sorry, I don't know the current rate, but I can bring that back to you.
I mean, just a guess. I mean, it's
That's right.
low.
Low.
It's very low, yes, sir.
Yes.
Money market and Truist, they just went up 4%. You might want to call them about that.
Okay. And we are
We'll see what Synovus is in April.
yeah, we are in the middle of a transition from Truist to Synovus, so
Maybe
when
they'll
the,
match it.
Yeah, with Truist, and they went up 4%, it's not this money.
as soon as the banking resolution and signature cards are signed tomorrow, they'll open, they have the new account numbers, and we'll start migrating that over. So that column will change from Truist overnight cash probably to just overnight cash while we are in the midst of that transition from one bank to the other. Most of these accounts will be just a switch, close out one, open the other. A couple of them, the revenue account, the general checking, those will have to continue parallel, or not parallel, but both for a couple of months, 3 months till we phase those out.
Checks clear.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. So our total cash and cash and reserves, total funding, $75,795,943. Page, oops, sorry.
While we're here, I think it makes sense for us to have a detailed kind of, whether it be a work group or whether we just do it in the next facilities meeting, or finance meeting, I'm sorry. I think we need to have a detailed conversation about our investments and get an understanding of how each of these dollars is invested, what's in the money market, what's that rate, is it variable, is it a fixed rate, what's in CDs, I mean, if you look in the paper now, every bank in town's advertising, 3-month CDs, 6-month CDs for anywhere from, 3 to 4%. I think we really need to look at this and even look at our overnight cash and
Well,
societies.
some of the overnight cash is being moved over into investments as those numbers have, it's more profitable now to go to investments versus overnight cash.
And even when it's not as profitable as now, I still think we need we've talked about this for a while. I'd like for us to put it to rest and get a group decision, whoever those decision makers are, and let's decide how much we really need in cash and how much, we're investing. And I get we can't just take all this overnight cash and go buy a 1-year CD, but, every month, if we're putting a small portion of it in, we might do it at over 12 months.
Right now, we're in the process of putting together budgets for fiscal year '24. Part of that process in the coming weeks will be to kind of detail the cash flow expectations for our projects. And definitely, I'm targeting that R&R reserve that we have currently in overnight cash with Truist of around 8.4 million, I think it was.
I think we just need some sort of cash
Yeah.
flow analysis and then, and then a real detailed discussion about our, what portion we're keeping in overnight cash, what portion is invested, and how those investments are made and what they're invested in and what those rates we're getting are.
Do you want the people from Synovus to come also and talk? I mean, the people that do our investments?
Whatever the staff thinks is appropriate.
All right. I don't know if
Have a
we could do it in
consultant
a
do it or-
finance meeting, or maybe we need to have a workshop or something. I don't know what's gonna work the best.
For transparency, if we want to do it in here, that probably makes sense. I mean, whether it's
We can do it in here, we'll see what the agenda looks like each month and schedule it in a month. Hopefully next month, but schedule it in a month. where-
even if it's a little longer agenda, I'd rather just get it over with personally.
we'll do it
I mean,
next month.
I'd love to
Then we'll let-
understand.
Good information.
We'll let
I'd love
Mr.
to understand what
Owens-
our investments are and what our percentages are. Because
Let
when I
Mr.
hear money market, I'm thinking 0.04%. And Ben saying they're giving 4%, which
It's
is,
a 0.0, yes, sir, for
Ma'am?
sure. It's a
Point.
0.0 for sure, yes, sir.
it is a 0.0.
0.0 something.
Yeah, that's my fear.
That's what Truist used to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between a 0.0 and a 4,
Four.
0.4.
We do
Yes.
get very detailed reports from Synovus as far as the investments are concerned, with maturity dates and earnings rates and things of that nature. We're more than happy to share that with you. That'll give you a little bit more insight. We do-
You'll actually get them now, because you're on the signature cards now, if it gets approved.
Yeah, I
So
just,
you'll actually get
There you
the
go.
reports.
Yes.
I would just love for y'all to make a presentation on,
Yeah.
basically all the dollars we've got, what percent is invested, each of those dollars, how they're invested, what the rate we're getting back for it is, what's the time commitment that we've got them in, and then let's make some decisions on whether, a money market account is the right place for, $14 million, or if $4 million goes in the money market account and 10 goes into 30-day treasury bonds, every, staged 30-day treasury bonds. I mean, obviously, we wouldn't want to lock everything in
Right.
for 30 days, but you might lock, a quarter of it this week, quarter of it next. I mean, we can talk about all that. Maybe we just need a big whiteboard in here. But,
We'll defer to Mr. Owens for that next month.
yeah, if we could have that
That's just-
presentation next month. Do y'all disagree, or y'all?
Oh, that's fine.
I think it's a great idea.
Capital One has a 11-month CD for 5%.
Yeah, I just bought a 7-year with, because I have some,
Yeah,
waiting on my son to buy a vehicle. And, I bought a 7-year, and it was like 4.75%.
yeah. Capital One's 11 months, 5%.
Okay.
And maybe as part of that, we need to have, prepared for that meeting what are we legally allowed to do? Kind of a refresher on, what our thresholds are and what we're allowed to invest in and what we aren't.
Okay.
I'm sorry, please
No,
continue.
no, no. You're fine. Page 7 is our project report. We have highlighted Project 2101, 2106, and 2213. Those are the projects that are being funded by the bond. So those expenses as of January the 31st totaled the $1,078,842 that we did the draw request. So we'll do this.
Discussion earlier, Chairman, at the bottom of the next page, you see total encumbrances on the bond project, so that 15 million, we got 10.5 encumbered.
Projects 2211 and 2212, those are, ARPA projects. So the $4 million that we have in ARPA funding, that is where that funding source is being used.
That's great.
There are some numbers over to the right. That was my calculations. I'm sorry, I should have removed that. The Dunbar Creek has two different funding sources there, and I was doing the split between those. At the bottom, we have capitalized projects. The difference in the construction in progress is that $13,443,000. As we capitalize it, it takes it out of construction in progress and moves it to the fixed asset column. So the infrastructure went up by that 13 million.
If you recall, we finished that SPOS project for construction in the summer. We finally closed it out because we received the record drawings.
We did come in $1,456,900 under budget for that. The funding source for that was the CIF account, and that has been released back to the available balance. If you'll turn to page 8, the highlighted portion there, the capital improvement reserves, that 1.4 million now is in that available balance of that $6 million. And just a reminder, on this project report, it records expenses as if the expenses incur at the same time that the cash leaves. So there's always a timing in when the expense comes and actual cash disbursements are made. But this project assumes that if you're recording the expense, the cash is now unavailable. Encumbers it. Any questions?
When we do the meeting we were just talking about with all the reserves and the investments and all, can we make sure that we go to the detail of understanding, like for each different type of reserve, what the legal requirements are and what the minimum amount we have to hold in reserve is, and to what level we can move reserves around? So, I mean, there might be some reserves that we're not able to, there might be some reserves that we've just created on our own that are not legally held reserves.
Yeah, those
such
are the
as-
elective reserves.
Right, so, exactly. So we might can invest those differently than the legally restricted reserves. I don't know that, I'm just making an assumption. But
Yes.
if we could get that, understanding of what we're legally have to have in reserves and how much, I mean, is there a percentage, or how is that calculated?
We have some that are long-term in those and some that have the short-term that has been moved over last fall.
And is within that reserve, is there a percentage we got a legally restricted fund, but does the whole thing have to be legally restricted, or is it a percentage, or, just some
We'll
of the
get on that
details
for you,
associated
yes.
with that? And also, we could make sure that when we're having those discussions, that we're including the amounts that are held by trustees and how those are invested, if
Okay.
at all.
They are being invested. We do get some interest income off those.
Because that's another 17.5 million that's
Yes.
worth understanding at least. And then, the last comment I was gonna make, if I may, is, a long time ago, this used to be a lot thicker, and I appreciate the abbreviated version. But being that Commissioner Watson is new to the commission and also to the committee, it might be worth bringing maybe in March a more detailed version with all the backup.
That is on the electronic copy that we send. Has he,
Could we just bring that in March maybe, and just maybe spend a few minutes just going through it in a little more detail, just for
Sure.
his edification, since it's the first one, and probably doesn't hurt once a year for us to see
Yes.
that data anyhow.
okay, we can do
I
that. 'cause
definitely I don't see the need in doing it every month unless y'all do, but maybe
No.
maybe
Because it
one
adds
time kind of.
like 15 pages to it. So
Yeah,
it's the
right.
detail that we use to bring the summaries here.
I was just
Yeah, we
thinking,
can do that.
one time at the end of the year, around March or so, if we're gonna do the reserves in February, it might make sense to do that in March. That's
Okay.
good with y'all.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Anything else for
Thank you.
Ms. Francis?
Thank you.
Mr. Burrows, anything else for the?
Only thing I was gonna say is we are, as Mr. Owens mentioned earlier, going through the budgeting process. Our hope is to present the first draft of the budget at the March Finance Committee meeting. Typically, our process has been we present the draft in March, we take your feedback, and then the April budget is where it is approved. If you recall, we approve the budget typically in April. We hold public meetings the second week of June for what the budget is going to be for everybody for next year, and then they go into effect July 1st. So we have the reason we try to approve in April is so we have adequate time to provide notice of the meetings the second week of June. So,
Anything else from the commissioners? Anyone else? All right, we'll stand adjourned.